Back again. I want to pick up on a concept now that is introduced and developed in the text. I regret that I don't have the page number in my lecture notes, but doubtless you've already read this, and as part of your self-study, you're going to reread it and highlight and journal. So I want to talk now about trust. And because we're talking about interactions of team members and how that impacts leadership styles and things like that. I would say something that is not me delivering a sermon, but I am convinced that trust is the foundation of every important relationship we will ever have. If we work together and I'm in a leadership or managerial role and you don't trust me, there will never be an important relationship. You will comply. You'll do precisely what you have to do because I have the authority to give lawful orders in that context. But me complying with what you ask, or rather you complying with what I ask you to do, is not even remotely equivalent to trusting me. So trust is enormous. Again, I am convinced, whether the relationship is professional, personal, business, without trust there is no important relationship. We may have relationships with 25,000 people, but they're not significant relationships. They're shallow, they're superficial. So before I do anything else, I want to give you what is a pretty competent definition of trust that's in the text, and it's in other literature as well. Trust is classically defined as a willingness to be vulnerable with a counterparty, with someone else, because you believe, you are convinced that the counterparty, this other person, will not behave opportunistically. You expose yourself. You're willing to be vulnerable because you don't think that the counterpart of this relationship will take advantage of you. That's trust. That's the classic definition of trust. So, I'll talk in a moment about where trust comes from. I think it comes from two different places. But I want to ask you a question which I wish you could answer in here. We can't, darn it, because y'all are not in the same room in this undisclosed subterranean location where I am today. What do we do in the absence of trust? Let me project you a couple of years into the future, 2.5, 3 years. You punch out of here, degree in hand, get a great job. And once you get settled into your new place, you begin living independently, you think, okay, I have a stable income, life is good, I've got my responsibilities reasonably under control. I'm driving a 29-year-old sled with 467,000 miles and only has 3 wheels. Time for a new vehicle. So you go buy a new car, truck, whatever you choose to get. But like most of us, you have to finance it. Instead of just writing a check for the purchase price of whatever this vehicle is, you make a down payment of some sort, a few $1,000s, and then you finance the difference. And it could be with a captive finance company like Ford Credit, or it could be with Core Federal Credit Union or a bank, and it doesn't matter. But does the lender trust you? Does the lender just say, listen, let's do this. 60 payments, $450 a month, here's the interest rate, and I just simply trust you to send me the money on the 15th of each month. No, of course that's absurd. Because you have no relationship. There's no trust. This is a commercial transaction, you're arm's length. So what will happen is the lender will take a look at your behavior. They'll grab a credit report. They'll verify your employment, not just that you work somewhere, but what your income levels are. And they'll make an assessment, and that assessment may be that, yes, you can afford, comfortably it seems, to make payments on this new vehicle. You're employed, you've got decent levels of income, and you behave responsibly. That's what your credit report says. So this lender makes a loan to you. They give you $35,000, $40,000 so you can pay J.C. Lewis Ford or whomever it is that you bought the vehicle from. But this thing about trust, since there is no trust, the lender's going to use a contract. You will sign a note where you promise to pay, and as part of those documents, you will give the lender a collateral interest in your new vehicle. So all that means is if for some reason you stop making payments, the lender has the legal authority to literally repossess your vehicle, to take possession of it, sell it for whatever they can recover in the market, and then file a deficiency judgment against you so that you have to pay the rest. So when we don't trust people, we enter into contracts. We haven't had a chance to build these important relationships. In fact, I want to ask you a question which unfortunately I'm going to have to answer myself. What's a prenup? What is a prenuptial agreement? To be sure, it's a contract, but what it does practically, is a prenuptial agreement negotiates the terms of a divorce before you marry. I don't think I would marry anybody if I didn't know that person well enough to trust her. I wouldn't. But yet we see these things used often. They're used by Hollywood idiots who couldn't find their butts with both hands in a flashlight, but they get $12 million to dance or appear in movies or something stupid like that. But the point is that a prenup is a contract. But what it does is it negotiates the terms of the divorce before you say I do. How sad is that? So people enter into prenups when they don't trust their new partner. Trust is powerful, foundation of every important relationship. So I want to talk to you briefly about where trust comes from. I've been studying leadership for 25 years and teaching it for that long, or maybe more, I guess, and I don't know everything, but I certainly understand the major questions. And trust is so central to leadership. Let me go back. If I'm a team leader and you don't trust me, we ain't going anywhere together. I can't imagine a worse situation, being in a leadership role and not being worthy of your trust. So, trust comes from two places. One is understandable, the other, I think, less so. Well understood in leadership literature, the trust has a history effect. Let's assume that Alexis, who is not sitting there where I'm pointing, but normally does. Let's assume that Alexis reaches out to me and she says, Dr. Bill, I need help. My car blew up. I've got to get to school. I've got to take this important test. Can you come and get me? And I say, I'll be there in drive time. Alexis, where are you? So 10 minutes later, I pull up. She hops in. I get her to school. That is T1. Time one. That's our first interaction. I made a promise to her that I kept. I said, I'll be there in drive time and I'll get you to school. So if we have multiple interactions where the counterparties, both of us, fulfill our promises, what we do is we build trust. If I did that repeatedly, if Alexis reached out to me and asked for my help and I told her that I would, and then I kept that promise. If we did that repeatedly, at some point she would say to herself, Norton is trustworthy. I can rely on him. If he says he's going to do something, he's going to do it. And he's not ever going to take advantage of me. You know that thing about not behaving opportunistically? So trust typically comes from this history effect, from these repeated interactions in which you and I keep the promises that we made to each other. And I don't know how many interactions we have to build trust, but trust has this history effect, us interacting and things turning out well. Now, the other source, the other place where trust comes from is very different, and I don't want to say it's scary, but that may be a reality. In the trust literature, there's something that's well understood, and it's called risk-taking propensity. I've studied it in entrepreneurship, leadership, and other disciplines as well. Each of us, this is a trait, each of us has some level of risk-taking propensity. We have a bias to engage in risky behavior or not. Now, usually our propensity to engage in risky behavior is somewhat uniform throughout our lives. If we have a relatively low risk tolerance, I would say to you in many dimensions of my life, I have a relatively low risk tolerance. I'm a very defensive, cautious driver. I'm relatively cautious with any financial decisions I make, whether it's overcommitting for a car or a mortgage, whether it's running up credit card debt, whether it's investing. This notion of me having a relatively low risk-taking propensity characterizes many dimensions of my life, not all of them, but many. So, and some people have a relatively high risk-taking propensity. What that means is that if they're willing to take risks, they tend to trust people immediately. They don't have to have this proof, this history, these repeated interactions. So trust comes from two places. For most of us, it comes from this history effect, where we interact repeatedly and each of us keeps the promises that we made. But for some people, and this is not a criticism, but it doesn't describe me, some people have a relatively high risk-taking propensity. I know guys that'll drive to Savannah, they'll push 110, 120 on I-16. Okay, you're dumber than a rock for 150 reasons. But there are a lot of people that have a relatively high risk-taking propensity. And those are people who tend to trust immediately. They don't require this interaction or this history because they're willing to take risks in most dimensions of their lives. So trust comes from two places. History, this repeated interaction, or the fact that the trustor, the person who's giving the trust, literally has a high risk-taking propensity as a trait, sort of the way they're wired. And that just describes how they go through life. So again, I wanted to talk about answering this question, where does trust come from? Because I think those two things describe it. Excuse me. Goodness. By the way, this is not Grey Goose. I don't drink. I get so stupid so fast when I do. This is just water that came out of that refrigerated cooler at the end of the hall. But I like having fun with you. So, I want to talk to you now about the concept of interdependence. Now, I'm talking about the way teams and groups interact. Some teams are interdependent, others are not. I want you to think about a lot of sports teams. Many sports teams what happens with the athletes, there's nothing interdependent. One athlete can perform uncommonly well, another athlete can struggle in the same contest or match, but the outcome or the behavior of the athlete who's struggling has no impact whatsoever on the one who's performing well. If you think about a golf team, I don't know how many golfers are on a team at the collegiate level. We're D1 school. But let's assume for the sake of discussion, whether it's women's golf or men's golf, that when these people go to a tournament, that only 7 players compete for score. And what happens, of course, is the team score is simply additive. You add up the scores of the 7 players and you arrive at the team score. That is precisely how the Georgia Southern rifle team works. They have a minimum of 4 shooters at every match, and although some of them may have individual bests or incredible performance, it is the sum of the scores of those 4 shooters that represent the team score. So some teams are not interdependent. What they do is simply additive. The activities and outcomes of each of the players individually are added, and they are summed to represent a team score. But many teams, in fact, perhaps even, I don't want to say classically that's true, many teams are interactive in the sense that the team members depend on other team members in real time to do something. I want you to think about this. Think about a football team. If you and I are on a football team and we are offensive players, I don't care. I played for, 9 years, I guess. I played from Pop Warner in the 5th grade through my freshman year of college. When I got to college, I realized that I was utterly worthless. Everybody was so much better than I was. Okay, so that's life. And I never tried out after my freshman year. I did play as a freshman, but not much. But my point is I was an offensive tackle. I was a right tackle, so I was a down lineman offensively. So there are 11 players on the team, and the quarterback takes the snap, and every one of us, all 11 players, have specific jobs, specific assignments. If it's a run, maybe my responsibility is to just punch a hole. Maybe we're double teaming with the tight end, we're double teaming a defensive tackle that's in front of me. It may be my responsibility to pull and trap. Who knows? If it's a pass play, what I'm going to do is for 3 or 4 seconds, I'm going to just hold, keep rushers from getting in, and after that I'll release and go downfield to see if I can do something there. But my point is, think about a quarterback. If we had the most talented quarterback on the planet, but the other 10 men didn't do their assignments, the line didn't block, the receivers didn't go out, nobody made catches or receptions, The fact that we have this fabulous quarterback means spit, doesn't it? So my point is, most teams are interdependent because they rely on their other team members in real time to carry out assignments. That's true in the military, that's true in sports, that's true in business, that's true everywhere. So my point is that this concept of interdependence is as simple as what I just said. In real time, at the same time, when things are happening simultaneously, we all must carry out some assignment, some task, or else the team doesn't accomplish what we set out to do. And interdependence, as I say, it describes many teams. Many are not. I talked about golf teams, rifle teams, things like that, where the scores are additive. But there are a lot of teams in many different domains where interdependence is a key feature. Now, new topic, team composition. There are basically two questions I want you to struggle with. You don't have to answer either of them today, but you need to understand these things conceptually because they're going to smack you in the face about 4 months after you get out of here. Unless, of course, you're going straight to prison. I mean, I don't know what happens in there. So, the first question you need to struggle with on team composition: did you inherit the team? Did somebody plop you down in a team that already existed? Like my experience with the reconnaissance platoon team in Vietnam. There were 23, 24 very talented, very experienced soldiers, and I was the new guy. So my point is, I inherited a team that was indescribably effective, incredibly well-functioning. Did you inherit them? But think about this. Think about my first experience in the rifle company. Good Lord, that place was more than a hot mess. I mean, it was just chaos. I don't know how any of those people survived. I really don't. I can't even imagine. I'm so thankful that I got a new assignment a month in. So, if you inherit a team, you had no voice, no role whatsoever in the selection or the composition of the team, do you? You have people who may be high speed, high energy, low drag. You may be people who are worthless as shrimp lips. But if you inherit a team, you simply have to work with what you got. Can you see how different that would be about team composition if you had a chance to literally form the team? Now, let's assume that I'm going to make a silly assumption, and that is that you've been in this organization for a year and a half or two. You've been in this role, essentially, you've had a chance to observe people and see their attitudes, their skills, their work ethic. So if you've had that opportunity to observe people in a workplace and get a pretty clear sense for what their potential to contribute is, that means that you could put together a team that is just world class, because you'd only pick the high speed people, right? The people that have good skills, good work ethic, good attitude. That's all I'd pick if I could. But life isn't usually that kind. So the first question, when we talk about team composition, did you inherit the team, good, bad, or ugly, or did you have a chance to form the team? Radically different outcome. Now, the second part of that question takes us to the second question. If you have a chance to form a team, what are your biases? Generally speaking, if you look at the literature of teams and composition and who belongs or who makes up a team, there are two paths you can go down. They're quite different. One is a path of heterogeneity, differences. The other is a path of homogeneity, sameness. So, I can promise you there are some situations where you would want a team that has homogeneity. What if you're in some big project in your organization and you're all fixing to roll out this major expensive capital goods or whatever, and your responsibility is to get a precise handle on what the product cost will be. So I might form a team of people who are primarily from accounting backgrounds. I might weave in one person from production or one person from engineering because we would bump into questions that we couldn't answer. But my point is, if our focus, our emphasis is on getting real precision in estimating product costs, I want people who have that kind of training. So in that instance, I would try to form a team that has homogeneity. A lot of people with accounting backgrounds who understand how to calculate and evaluate product costs. Similarly, there are many situations where I want no interest whatsoever in homogeneity. I want heterogeneity. I want you to think about instead of you having the responsibilities I just described, I want you to pretend, I want you to role play that you are going to form a new venture team because you are an aspiring entrepreneur. You have this really cool idea, a concept, a product that you want to bring to the market, but you can't do that alone. There is no such thing as solo entrepreneurship. There is always an entrepreneur who is the lead entrepreneur. She or he literally had the idea, developed the concept, is sort of the spark behind everything that happens. So every new venture has a lead entrepreneur, somebody who is essentially birthing the child, whatever this thing is that you're bringing to market. But that lead entrepreneur can't do things alone because she or he doesn't have all the skills that are needed. So if I were forming a new venture team, if I were that lead entrepreneur, let's assume I have some crazy good idea and I've done enough research, talked to people that are potential buyers, and I believe that there's a significant level of market acceptance for what I want to do. I would want a team that is clearly got a great deal of heterogeneity. I would want somebody with a background in marketing so that we come up with strategies for taking this thing to market. I would want somebody with a strong background in operations. Whatever it is, we either have to deliver a service or manufacture a product. So I want somebody strong in operations. I want somebody with strength in IT for our internal systems, for a web presence. I might want somebody who's got a good background in social media, because it's possible we may be in a domain where that reaches and touches a lot of our prospective customers. I would clearly want people with accounting skills, with finance skills. We might need engineers, who knows? But you see my point? I'm going to put together this team based on a blend of different skills and education and experiences. I am purposefully building my new venture team to have heterogeneity. I want to take advantage of people's different competencies. So there's an argument clearly that supports homogeneity, sameness in the composition of a team, and there's also an argument that is equally as powerful to support heterogeneity, these differences of backgrounds and skills and educational experiences. I am running out of bullets, y'all. This is the third presentation that I've taken today, and I had that field training exercise, and I need to chill. I need to go home and just love on Max. Max is my puppy. I want to talk briefly about conflict in an organizational context. Most of the people who study conflict and resolution and negotiation and all of those related constructs would tell you that in an organizational setting, conflict comes in two distinctly different forms, distinctly different. One is actually healthy, the other is deeply dysfunctional. So here's the healthy conflict. It's called cognitive conflict. We're in a group, a team, whatever we are, and we're going to do something, and we simply engage in an active debate. I suggest something and you say, whoa, time out, Goober. That's not a good choice. Here's why. And then you tell me why you think my recommendation was poorly developed. Well, that's healthy. You didn't say that I'm ugly and my mama dresses me funny. You said, I don't think that's the right path. Here's a different one, and here's why. So you present a competing argument and you support it. So cognitive conflict is healthy. What we do is we debate, we discuss, and we together arrive at what we think is the optimal solution or response, whatever it is that we're trying to do. Now, so cognitive conflict is functional and healthy. It really is. The other type of conflict, which is bad ugly, is social conflict. Social conflict is deeply dysfunctional because that means is that instead of debating with the issues, the problems, the challenges, we attack the person. In fact, it's often described with a Latin term ad hominem, and that literally means attack. Understand, it means attack the man. So social conflict, if we're in the same group and I propose something and you say, Norton, you were just dumber than a pile of poop. How did you even walk through that door in there? You see my point? Instead of challenging my ideas or refining them or offering an alternative, you were attacking me. You're telling me that I'm stupid and ugly and worthless, and I don't mind any of that. I'll just shoot you. No, I won't. No, I won't. But you see my point? You see how different that is? Cognitive conflict where we debate, discuss, improve. social conflict where we literally attack the speaker, we attack this other person. We see that always in every political campaign I have ever seen. I've seen campaigns where 3 people ran for coroner in a county and they attacked each other. That characterizes absolutely every political campaign, and that is that candidates, unless they are above the fray, and not many of them are above the fray, they attack each other. Now, sometimes candidates for some elected office will start saying, I really intend to take the high ground, but the other candidate may just try to rip their hearts out, and they are often, in my view, forced to respond. Not to attack, but to rebut. To say, gee, that's not even remotely true, and here's why. But I guess my point is that social conflict is characterized by almost all elections. I don't care what it's for. I mean, it could be for the mayor in Port Wentworth. It simply doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the level is, what the responsibility is. Almost all campaigns for elected office devolve. They literally go down to social conflict where candidates attack each other. They say, oh yeah, well really, your mother swims out after troop ships, or whatever they say to each other. So again, I know that's simplistic because this is a principles course. This isn't a course of negotiation or conflict resolution. But I wanted to talk to you about conflict and say that it's reasonably understood that in an organizational context, we're not talking families or interpersonal relationships or nations or anything like that. In an organizational conflict takes 2 forms and they are distinctly different. Cognitive conflict is healthy. It's beneficial, it's developmental. Social conflict is just bad, ugly, and it should be purged, always. As I talk about that, there was a comment in the text that I didn't miss. You've probably read it. I just want to highlight this. I'm not going to do anything with it other than introduce it to this conversation about conflict. The comment in the text was one about incivility at work. I don't know who did the survey. I didn't drill down and read the paper from which these data came. But someone did a survey of employees, and again, I haven't looked at the science behind it. But this survey, 98% of the people who reported said that they experienced some kind of incivility at work. People treating them rudely, aggressively, dismissively, 98%. Oh my goodness. So the last thing I want to talk to you about today is different techniques or styles, if you will, for handling conflict. The text talks about 5, and some I think are quite good and others are less so. So I'm just going to discuss them in the order that the text presents them. One of the things that they say that we can do to handle conflict is to avoid it. Well, that's not very easy. And it's always going to be suboptimal. By that I mean it's never the right choice. Because if there's conflict and we just avoid it, we go hide in our offices, the problem is unresolved. It has to have some sort of solution. It has to come to some kind of a resolution. So avoiding conflict, if I could, I would. If I could, I would. There are often situations where I don't want to actively engage in any kind of a conflict. But in an organizational setting, I have responsibilities. And besides that, I want you to think about that. I think that's probably what happens when you might experience bullying in a workplace, where there's some open hostility and you just say, I'm going to step away from all this. You are adversely impacted, nothing positive happens, and whatever's going on is going to persist. It's going to continue. So avoiding conflict, although most of us would like to do that, is a poor choice always. The next thing they talk about is to be accommodative. I want to share with you my perspective, my view of the world, and you don't have to share the same worldview. There are many situations in an organizational setting where I am happy to be accommodative. If we're doing something together, and I propose something, and you want to make a suggestion to change it, if it has anything to do with preference, with style, with something that literally accommodates your wishes, I'm happy to do that. I'll do that cheerfully and willingly without even blinking. What I will never change, what I will never accommodate is if I think we're going to do something that's fundamentally wrong or something that is essentially characterless. So my point is, when we talk about accommodation, I'm perfectly willing to do it. If it's a matter of style or preference or presentation. But if it's anything that's substantive, if you're going to suggest that we make a decision that I think is poor on any dimension, or if it shows an absence of character, I will spill my blood and yours, again, without even blinking. So there are times, plenty of times, I'm willing to accommodate. But clearly, you have to establish whatever standards you think should apply. The third thing they say is one way of handling conflict is the use of force. Now, they're not talking gunfights or baseball bats. They're talking the use of power. The classic definition of power in an organizational context is the ability to influence outcomes. If you possess power, because you have legitimacy of position, or because you have expertise, or you have the power to reward or coerce, or whatever the case may be, or even referent power. If you have power, you have the ability to influence outcomes. And I want you to think about this. What if you're in a group and you can't agree on a course of action, and somebody says, look, let's go one level up. Let's go to our big boss and see what she or he wants to do. What will happen in that situation typically is the two sides with different perspectives will present their positions, and the big boss will say, okay, I am supportive of this one. Let's go down that road. So that ends it. The big boss has the authority to say, here's the choice. Make it happen. So when I say force it, we're not talking anything that's destructive or physical. We're talking about the use of power. Power is the ability to influence outcomes. And people who possess power can do that, whether it's expertise or positional power or whatever the case may be. The fourth thing they talk about is compromise. Oh dear, Norton says no. Let me tell you why Norton says no. There's a lot of literature, mostly in the domain of org behavior, but also in social psychology. Gentleman Kahn and other people like that will tell you that anytime you compromise, what you're probably going to do is make a maladaptive decision, one that doesn't match up with what you need to do. Let's pretend that you and I are both city councilmen in some big city, Baltimore, New York, or whatever the case may be. And you want to have a resolution that the council puts in place, which impacts what we do locally. You say, I want to release all prisoners who are currently incarcerated who are right-handed. That's probably something like 85% of any population, prison population or otherwise. So you're proposing this resolution that will become binding in our city, and you want to release any prisoner that has dexterity on the right side. And I say, no, that is absurd. They are incarcerated for a reason. They committed a crime, went through the judicial process. They need to be there. And I don't really know what would bring us to this. So what if you come to me because we are political animals, and you say, look, I know you're very interested in this other thing, this other initiative. It could be sustainability, it could be literacy programs, it could be anything. But there's something that I want to accomplish as a city councilman. And you come to me and say, look, you're not going to buy into my all right-handed prisoners thing, but I'm not going to support you on this thing that you want to do. So if you want my support there, you've got to, come along with me on part of this. So maybe we rewrite the ordinance or the resolution to say, okay, we're going to release all prisoners who are right-handed who have green eyes. Is that a compromise? Did I move off of my position and accepted something that I didn't think was right? Did you similarly, instead of getting everybody who was right-handed released, just get people with a particular eye color? So we both compromised, but what we have arrived at is a compromise that's goofy. It's maladaptive. It doesn't match up with any problem or concern that we have. So I know that may sound like a silly example, but all compromises are just that. People say instead of doing what they think is right and proper and correct, they will do less than that to accomplish some other objective. Now that I've compromised with you on this prisoner release thing, you're going to support me in whatever that initiative was I wanted to do. So in my view, we're both idiots, in my view. Compromise is almost always deeply dysfunctional, always. Find a solution that works. Don't find something that is somewhere between the two anchor points just so that you can vote affirmatively for it. I promise you, in any organizational setting, now that's not true, as I say, that's not true spousally or with children or 100 of other things, but in an organizational setting, compromises are maladaptive, and that's not Bill Norton's opinion. That's well established in the literature of social psych and org behavior in other places as well. And then the last one, the fifth one that they talk about for handling conflict, is to make decisions collaboratively. Oh dear, we talked about that. My view, this is my assessment, that is hands down the best. I've done it in the military context, I've done it in businesses, I've done it in academia. When I reach out to you and say, I want to hear what you have to say. Here's the plan I'd like to go forward with, critique it. Tell me how we can improve it. So you then will say things that you might say, you know, I've thought through this, I've reflected on it, I really think it's the right response. Well, great. I have your support, but somebody else may say, oh, no. Here's what we should do, and here's why. So everyone has a chance to shape what we're doing. Now, somebody's got to be the ultimate decision maker. Not every voice is going to be integrated in the final decision, but simply the fact that y'all had the opportunity to influence that you knew that you were respected, that you were valued as a contributing member of this team, that someone reached out to you and said, I want to hear from you, I want you to tell me what you think we should do. So collaborative decision making is just, it is so good, I just have no words. I mean, it is clearly the best. So what the authors talk about in this part of the text are 5 different styles of handling conflict: avoidance, accommodation, force, compromise, and collaboration. I think there are times to accommodate. I actually think there are times to force something because it's the right decision. I think collaboration is the best. Avoidance and compromise tend to be self-defeating. They never accomplish what anybody sets out to do. So, I love you. This now takes us through session 23, which is 31 March. So this takes you through Tuesday of next week. When I say takes you through, the sessions that match up with the class meetings and the syllabus. This now presents session 23. So today is 22 and 23. We talked about the fact that I've posted the midterm. The midterm itself tells you the due date to get at the Dropbox. So for today, we're done. I love you. It's a Friday. Have a wonderful weekend. Be safe. And we will talk sometime next week.